Alright, it's time to talk about Dover. Thanks to a rained out race on Sunday, we had to race at Dover on Monday. On my Instagram live, I mentioned that I wasn't really excited for this race, and afterwards, it doesn't seem like too many other people were very impressed by this race. Why was I not excited for the Dover race? I am a relatively new NASCAR fan, so I just want to make sure that that's clear. I started watching starting with last year's Daytona 500 and seeing Austin Dillon win. So that was my very first live experience watching NASCAR on television. Before then, I had been a longtime fan playing the video games, sort of catching stuff when my dad would watch it and that kind of thing. So just be aware of that. But I have gone back and watched a lot of the older races and all that kind of good stuff, so I'm not completely ignorant on past generations of racing. But I will say I think that having a sort of fresh perspective as well kind of gives me the ability to look at it without, sort of rose-tinted glasses. So, Dover. Last year, both races, even though one of them was won by a driver that I like very much, Chase Elliott, I pretty much couldn't stand either race. Both races were super boring. There was almost nothing interesting about them, especially the spring race, and I didn't see any reason we needed to go to this track twice last year, and I see even less of a reason the more that I continue to see this track. I hate this track in the video game. I hate this track basically everywhere. Now, I don't know if Dale Jr. was joking when he mentioned paving it on Twitter, but I kind of actually thought that sounded like a good idea. It could create Dover into kind of another Bristol almost, because I'm wondering if the concrete surface has something to do with why the racing sucks so badly at Dover. So what are people saying about it? Well, one of the biggest things that I see tossed around a ton, especially this year with the new race package that everybody has been, either vehemently defending and everything is great, or hating and bashing and saying it's the worst package ever, they've ruined it again, and all this kind of crazy stuff. All the NASCAR commentators and mostly the Twitter and sort of journalist types have been talking about is quality passes. And I've seen this at a few different tracks this year. So if we look at quality passes in the 2018 Dover Spring Race, were 356, okay? This year, we saw 662. That's a pretty big leap. That's a lot more passing. And one of the things people were talking about, specifically Kevin Harvick, was that you couldn't pass anybody. That was one of the big criticisms. Nobody could pass anybody. And I think that some of the defenders of this race were talking about the fact that the number of passes went up significantly. And so a lot of people are trying to say, well, how can you possibly say there was no passing? And also Martin Truex Jr. passed the entire field because he started in the back, and so did Alex Bowman. Now, I think that this is a fair point to bring up against those who are criticizing the amount of passing by simply stating the facts that there was a lot more passing. As far as lead changes go, last year we had 17 lead changes. The year prior we had 17 lead changes as well. In 2016 we had 19, and in 2015 we had 15 lead changes. And this year we had 15 lead changes. So it was down from the last couple of years, but the same as 2015. This race had the most leaders of any of the last 5 Dover races, with 11 different leaders, and the closest was in 2016. We had 10 different leaders. So here we have a ton of passing throughout the field, and really this translates to not a ton of different leaders or lead changes, which is I think what people care more about than the sort of through the field thing. People like to throw in this, quality of passes and this huge number, that just sounds completely preposterous. I don't think that that's the number that anyone cares about watching on television. At least I don't really. Watching last year, I'm a big Kyle Busch fan. So watching him win the Charlotte race and lead basically every lap of the Coke 600, and, even if there was thousands of passes throughout the field and everyone's zipping around each other and just having a good time, and he's 4 seconds ahead of all of this, I was happy as a Kyle Busch fan. I love seeing him. I wish he was 10 laps ahead of everybody, great. As just a racing fan, watching Kyle Busch be 4 seconds ahead of everybody, it doesn't matter how much they're passing each other and gaining these stupid points. I don't care about all of these dumb points, and especially with today's format, I care about wins. All right, a driver's got to win. Because if he doesn't win before he hits the playoffs and he's barely pointing into the playoffs, I'm not exactly feeling great. Maybe he suddenly starts winning a bunch of races in the playoffs and he wins the championship, great. Fact of the matter is, I'm here for wins. When my driver wins, I get the race to win diecast. I'm not getting his 3rd place, his 5th place diecast. I'm getting his race win diecast. This sort of quality of passes thing means almost nothing to me, and I feel like it's a silly stat to throw around. And the whole there's not enough passing thing, and this whole debate to me is a little bit silly, because I wanted to bring up Bristol, which to me is the best track on the schedule. In the Bristol spring race, and I wanted to bring up the spring races specifically because for the most part, at least what I saw last year, all of the spring races are usually garbage compared to their fall counterpart if they have one. And this is true almost every single time at every track, with the exception of maybe the Daytona 500, which is exciting both times that we go there. Bristol's spring race last year, 949 quality passes. This year, 1,097. So not a huge increase, but leagues ahead of Dover both years. And this year we had 21 lead changes and 9 different leaders. So we actually had more lead changes but less leaders. The years prior we had 18 lead changes, 14, 16, and 21 lead changes in 2015. So the funny thing that I'm noticing here is in 2015, the wings on the back bumper look pretty similar to 2015. And it seemed to produce pretty similar results as far as stats are concerned. In that 2015 race, there was only 6 different leaders. So what does any of this actually mean? I don't think it really means a whole lot. I really don't. Because whether it's 9 different leaders, 6 different leaders, 2 different leaders, 30 lead changes, 5 lead changes. What makes a good race? I think the fact of the matter is, you can't just dive into a bunch of statistics and decide whether or not something is good. It is all about the eyes test. NASCAR brought this up last year when they were talking about changing this package. I think this is a more complicated issue than stats are concerned. I think this has something to do with who's broadcasting the race and a few other things. Last year, when we hit Chicagoland, we somehow got one of, if not the best race of the year. And I think that was a complete fluke that it just happened to be when we switched from Fox to NBC. However, I did notice every single race, I think, since it switched to NBC, was a better race. Every single race after Chicagoland was better, viewing-wise, than the ones on Fox. I love the ticker on Fox that shows you the lap times and that kind of thing. I love that, and I hate the one on NBC where it's scrolling through and you're like, oh, there's my driver fan. I don't know what place he's in. No idea. But that's maybe the only thing that I love about Fox. Because on NBC, the races are always more exciting. They show the battles between people deep in the pack that show off these quality passes and actually make this race seem exciting. What I'm trying to get at here is all of these stats are only as meaningful as what you're viewing. But if you're basically stuck watching KFC commercials every 10 seconds and the same Denny Hamlin commercial for NASCAR while you're watching NASCAR, and then when they flip back to it, they just show one car as close as possible or 1,000 in-car cams, or they show you the very tail end of a battle or cut away just as it gets exciting, and just constantly are showing you something that doesn't really get you all that excited, you're bound to think the race sucked. Imagine with any other sport, if you were stuck, let's say in baseball, just watching the left fielder stand around when there's nothing going towards him, and literally as soon as a ball comes towards him, they flip it over or they send it to commercial. I'm not trying to say that NBC is perfect because they still have 1,000 commercials every 10 seconds and are just riddled with NASCAR ads. Stop showing NASCAR ads while you're watching NASCAR. That doesn't make sense. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. It just doesn't make sense. It's stupid. Stop rolling ads for the thing you're watching. So Kyle Busch made a bunch of very vulgar comments about how the package is terrible and it sucks and it's the worst. Kevin Harvick also echoed these comments as well, and maybe a few other drivers. Kyle Busch has complained multiple times about hating the car, and he brought it up for the car tomorrow, and he brought it up now. It's not to say that he should be discredited because he's complained about multiple generations of race car. I think Kevin Harvick put everything very eloquently, and he basically said, listen, it sucks being out there because you feel like you can't compete because you can't pass. The reason why I also believe these guys, even though they've both had their fair share of complaining about previous packages and they never seem satisfied, is because as a viewer, I noticed things like Brad Keselowski leading the race. Chase Elliott wasn't able to touch him, and Chase, I think, had the better car. Once Keselowski wasn't in the lead, he fell like a rock. If you're not the leader, then you drop like a rock, and if you are the leader, you get this insane turbo boost, it seems like, above anyone else, and you can't be passed. But then you get guys like Dave Moody. He said, translation, I didn't win. This comment is stupid. His reaction to people saying that it is stupid is even worse. Basically what he's saying here is that Kyle and other drivers should just be completely dismissed anytime they criticize NASCAR, unless they're the winner. I'm gonna kind of just skip past that because I don't know what else to say about it other than it's ridiculous. And then Steve O'Donnell also said things that are a little bit ridiculous. He said, these are the best drivers in the world, it's going to be hard to pass. So to wrap things up, the Dover race was not good. And I don't think I've ever seen a good race at Dover, and I think it kind of needs to lose one of its races, and it needs to be a one and done for the year. Something needs to be done to make this track exciting because it just isn't exciting. I think everyone needs to kind of take a chill pill a little bit and just sort of move on. But at the same time, I think it is totally legitimate for people to air their grievances and their concerns. I'm going to leave a link in the description if you've never checked out my Instagram. I used to do a lot of unboxings on the channel, and I'm probably going to do all of that stuff on my Instagram at this point. Mostly it's NASCAR diecasts, and I think that by and large you're going to see a lot of NASCAR commentary on this channel. So anyways, if you liked it, then share it, show people, because I don't have a whole lot of people watching, so it helps a lot when you're able to sort of help me get it out there and get more eyeballs on it. Thanks.